We have a great show for you tonight. We have a guest director, producer, John Gallagher, will be on the phone with us for the entire hour. You're listening to Center Stage with Michael TOTA. Harvey Rothman is out today, so I'm flying solo. So you've just got me with you tonight, folks. Let's see what's been up the past 2 weeks. Since last we met. I was at the Kiss concert last Saturday. Got a little banged up, old school, 80s style. Listened to some 60-year-old rockers bang it out. And let me tell you, I saw Kiss probably 15, 16 times. And while I still miss the Catman and the Space Ace, those two guys really rocked it, along with Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer. So, if they are in the area or your area, wherever you may be listening to, I could tell you it was a show well worth it. And also, not being a particularly big Def Leppard fan, I was pretty impressed with their set as well. So hats off to those guys, still rocking it out as they were since the 70s and the 80s. Next week, I'll be seeing Jackson Browne and John Fogerty. So for you Creedence fans, I'll let you know next show how that show turned out and how that was. What else is new? I've gotten some pretty interesting phone calls past few weeks. One of them being to get involved with producing a film. I'm not at liberty to talk much about it now. It's highly confidential, but they're looking to raise some money and do that, and talking to some investors, and so I'm involved with that. And it's interesting because I've come to learn that as new as this crowdfunding, as they've come to call it, has been, this Kickstarter type stuff, it's almost become a four-letter word at this point that, if you're going on Kickstarter or any of those others trying to raise some money, it almost seems like it's passé already, and folks are above that. So I'd be interested in feedback on that, folks. And you, as always, you can write me at mtota, T-O-T-A, centerstage@yahoo.com, and let me know what your thoughts on it. I'm always interested in hearing listener feedback on anything. If there's any show topics that you'd like to have, or any guests that are in the New Jersey area or not in the New Jersey area that would like to come in, call in, and be a guest on the show, if they're involved in the entertainment industry in any way, shape, or form, I'd be happy to speak to them and get them in touch with our producers, and we can get them booked and ready, because that's what the show is about, folks. It's about exposing new talent, working talent that wants to be somewhere, talent that has or needs a voice, and we're here to give them that voice, okay? So, without any further ado, I am going to go to a break and bring back with you director-producer John Gallagher. You may know him from the cult classic The Deli. And he's going to talk about that, talk about folks that he's worked with and careers he's helped in the past, students he's had, and what he's doing next. So stay tuned. You're listening to Center Stage with Michael TOTA. And on the phone, I've got John Gallagher, who's given some early roles to the careers of Gretchen Mol, John Leguizamo, Dennis Leary, Frank Vincent. He's directed the cult classic, The Deli. He's got several movies in production, just signed a 3-picture deal with Stanulus Productions, and he's currently working on his next film, The Networker. My guest tonight, John Gallagher. Welcome, John.
Michael, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. So let's talk. How'd you get started with directing?
Well, when I was a kid, I was really obsessed and intrigued with early 30s movies, what are now called pre-code movies. But at the time, they were just like these really cool black and white movies. And I spent a lot of time. My family's from New York originally, my mom from Brooklyn, my dad from Queens, and I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and I would constantly question them about, these great stars of yesteryear. And I was so fascinated by these films that I would actually tape record the credits off of the old movies, put them down on index cards, make notes about the films. I would get straight A's, so my parents would let me set the alarm clock for 2 o'clock on a school night to watch, Horse Feathers or Citizen Kane. So I really had, without realizing it, gave myself an education in our film heritage. And then when I hit around 11 years old, I started making films myself, starring my kid brother Vinny, and came to the realization that a lot of films I would see would be directed by the same people: John Ford, William Wellman, Raoul Walsh, Frank Capra, etc. And that gave me an indication, that there was this invisible storytelling force behind the film. And that was really the impetus. And then went to film school up at Emerson College up in Boston, and started a film society where I could actually book films to show, and started a film journal called Grand Illusions that allowed me to interview different filmmakers that would come into town. And my very first interview being with the incredible Elia Kazan, the only man to have directed Brando, Montgomery Clift, James Dean, and De Niro. So again, learning constantly from the past.
Now, how did you?
I think is a crucial thing for both actors and filmmakers to do today. And believe me, it's much easier today to see a lot of these movies than it was when I was a kid, pre VCR and pre Turner Classic Movies.
Right. Now let me interrupt you. How did you find Kazan? Because obviously with the controversy with controversy with Kazan, right? And for those John, let me just brief this.
Parties.
Yep. Let me just set this up for those that might not know. Is Kazan is not only famous for directing films, he's also famous for naming names during the McCarthy era. So
yes.
when many people were out of work and lost their jobs, Kazan said, hey, there's this one, there's that one, there's that one, and he caused quite a few people in Hollywood to be out of work for quite some time. So with that, I'm guessing when you interviewed him, he was not the most popular person in the world.
This was upon the release of his last film, The Last Tycoon, starring De Niro, and he was still. Look, he made On the Waterfront is his kind of way to address being a rat, basically. And yes, while he did name names, he, when you look at the roll call of great pictures, Streetcar Named Desire, On the Waterfront, Baby Doll, etc., and even Scorsese and De Niro, still stood by him. In fact, when they presented him with a special Academy Award a couple of years before his death, although there were many people in the audience.
Right, I know what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say.
Standing ovation.
Yep. And Scorsese.
I was 19 years old. I'm in there's a press party at the Ritz-Carlton in Boston, and this little man walks in. No one recognized him. I knew what he looked like, so I ran over and I corralled him and sat down and asked, some pretty dumb 19-year-old questions, like ask him to compare, Brando, De Niro, Dean, Clift, etc. And I got to be a better interviewer eventually, and interviewed, many hundreds of actors and directors. I mean, Professor Truffaut and Lee Marvin. I published a book called Film Directors on Directing, which gathered a lot of these interviews, and it was used as a standard text in many film schools for years. And again, this was a huge learning experience. I mean, to be able to talk, face to face with Dennis Hopper, and ask him, what is this? What's method acting? And challenge him to cry on cue, which he did.
Wow.
To be able to talk to Mark Rydell about working with Henry Fonda and Katharine Hepburn.
Okay, let me just when you interviewed Dennis Hopper, was this post Apocalypse Now?
It was post-apocalypse, but pre-Colors.
Because I think that
he was really at a very down point in his career.
Because
the interview actually is on. You can search for it on YouTube. Just put both our names in there, and a number of these interviews are on there. And again, fascinating because he was one of the last of the studio contract players, which just doesn't exist anymore. I mean, back in the day, if you were signed to a studio, it was a 7-year deal, and they gave you all kinds of acting lessons, dancing lessons, singing, etc., and you would do screen tests with actors being tested, and it was a very comprehensive kind of training ground. And of course, today you don't have that.
Today,
actors have to be a little more resourced.
Yeah, today it's hard enough getting. Today it's hard enough getting signed for an under 5. I'm still working on it.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's crazy. Now let me ask you about Hopper. Was he in that drug phase when you were in? Because
he seemed to be clean and sober. I'll never forget his eyes looked like they were screwed in, like a light bulb. They could screw them in and screw them out. He said "man" 300 times in an hour, but he was very forthcoming. Because when I would interview these guys, for example Lee Marvin, who I always loved, I wasn't asking them about so. Did you sleep with Donna Reed on Gun Fury? I was asking about the work.
Sure.
And I was asking about, a lot of times about directors that had been neglected. Like I asked Lee Marvin about Raoul Walsh, and he was like, "Oh my guys, no one's mentioned his name to me in 35 years." So that was a kind of a bonding thing, if you will. So that he trusted me to tell the truth, basically, and speak about his art. He said something very interesting. He said, Lee Marvin, that he never found his character until he had the right hat. And he spent a lot of time in wardrobe looking for the right hat for the character.
And the one thing about Lee Marvin is, for those that don't know, one interesting piece of trivia is that he was one of Spielberg's original choices for Captain Quint.
That's right. He was the original choice.
Him, and then he went to Sterling Hayden, who was, for those that might not recognize the name, Captain McCluskey from The Godfather.
Yeah, it's General Jack D. Ripper from Dr. Strangelove.
There you go, Jack D. Ripper, and then they'd worked with Robert Shaw in the Sting, and they recommended him to Spielberg, but So I mean, Lee Marvin,
Michael, because what we're talking about these artists and these pictures, and honestly, this is young actors need to know this stuff. They need to know our film heritage. The best directors, the Scorseses, the Coppolas, they know the Bogdanoviches. They know these filmmakers, and there's a frame of reference here. Well, I mean, a writer doesn't become a writer without reading, Shakespeare and Fitzgerald and Hemingway. And by the same token, I mean, when I run into a new actor who's never, seen a John Cassavetes Jenna Rollins movie, I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And in my acting classes, I give out a list.
Right.
Of 100 films that I consider essential viewing for for actors.
Right.
And
John,
and people, like, all the time, I will get emails from past students saying, John, I just finished the list, amazing. And it really, because it informs, it inspires, it entertains. And on times when, the old career isn't going so hot, it's really awesome to, watch Fellini's Nights of Cabiria, for example.
Right, John, it's so funny you're saying this, because I can't tell you how many folks, just sitting in a green room with some young actors, whether it's, doing a play or on the set of a movie, and, inevitably the subject comes up, a film and whatever. And it's funny you're bringing up Cassavetes, because to me, he was one of the original folks that in high school, I would just watch Killing of a Chinese Bookie over and over and over again. And the same thing, Woman Under the Influence, Peter Falk's performance in that, outrageous, with Jenna Rollins, who was his wife.
Amazing.
And to find that folks who are taking film classes have no idea who John Cassavetes is when the subject comes up, and they can't understand how floored I am. I just appreciate it, because you just validated me in probably about 20 conversations that I've had.
You're in high school watching Chinese Bookie? Oh, my God. And I'll tell you, you mentioned Killing of a Chinese Bookie. Of course, I directed Ben Gazzara in one of his favorite movies. We were very, very close. I got to know Jenna through Ben. And I learned so much working with Gazzara. He wrote a terrific autobiography called In the Moment, which is really essential reading, and he was just the greatest. I traveled with him a lot. We went to a number of film festivals together in Germany and France and Florida. And of course, in Europe, he was just revered. Whereas here, he was not very well known, and it indeed took us 5 years to get the financing for the picture was called Blue Moon, for us to get the financing for that film, because Ben was not, not the name here that he was in Europe.
Right. And for the listeners, the young listeners that may not know who Ben Gazzara is, I encourage you to just IMDb his name and watch anything he's in, because stellar actor, just as good as anybody that's out there, even better. But yeah, another one of those things. And then we've had these conversations. Brilliant actors who just, they make a living, and they never hit that what one might deem A-list caliber work, or should I say A-list caliber stature, but they do A-list caliber work.
Ben did so many movies, and he did so many bad movies, and I would, of course, track them all down, and I'd ask him, there's some 1977 really bad Italian gangster picture called The Sicilian Connection, and it's just awful. And I asked him, so Ben, The Sicilian Connection, and he would just say, Rent,
Yep.
So, they all do it. And you can't begrudge.
No. In fact, I think Christopher Walken once did a thing, and somebody kind of asked him. They said, "Do you turn anything down?" And his answer, was brilliant. I thought, because he said, "Hey, you know what? I like to work, and I like to create roles. I'm an actor, and the more opportunity I have to do this, the more I'm going to do it. And it doesn't matter to me whether." What the salary is. I don't think he's too concerned about money at this point in his career. And I don't think he's concerned about whether or not he's in a flop or a hit. I think he's just saying, hey, it's another role for me to dig into and create. And
this is also, Michael, this is a big reason why, you'll see in a lower budgeted film, say, you'll see like a name actor, and you might think, oh, geez, how the heck did they get him? Well, it's because he's playing a role that he hasn't. For example, in the Deli, we had Ice-T strictly because he wasn't playing a gangster. He was playing a meat delivery man.
Right.
And he loved playing a different part. So that's something for filmmakers to bear in mind. When you're looking for those couple of name actors that, sadly, most indie films need in order to recoup.
Well, and that's just it. Let's talk about that for a little bit, because I know that, for every independent filmmaker that's out there listening right now, their main, I've had a few in here and a few that you've known. Their main concern or their main struggle is raising money. And I just, recently, I don't know if you heard my intro, but recently this week I was called to get involved with producing a film. And while the film has some potential investors that are willing to risk some of their money, and there's also these crowdfunding things that are becoming real popular, Kickstarter and so forth. But already, I mean, as new as I think these crowdfunding websites are, already they've become almost four-letter words in the industry as like, well, you don't want to do that because that waters down your product. And I mean, already it's almost a sign of, you're doing an amateur hour if you're trying to raise money on Kickstarter. What's your take on that?
Well, I've tried Kickstarter a couple times without success. I think a lot of people do Kickstarter thinking that there are people with disposable income just surfing around that site looking for interesting things to send money to. Now, I feel that these crowdfunding sources are much more about who do you know with money. Okay. And these are not investments. These are donations. Although apparently there's a new law that will make these donations investable, so to speak. And of course, with Kickstarter, if you're trying to raise, $20,000 and you only raise $2,000, you don't get anything. Indiegogo, you get what you raise. I also Spike Lee raised the money for his newest film on Kickstarter. Come on, Spike, give us a break over here.
Right.
So it has become something of a dirty word. I mean, look, as far as raising money, that's the great problem. Always has been, always will be. There's, a gazillion ways to do it.
Well, let's talk about that.
When I started out, I was 22, fresh-faced out of film school, and we went to, doctors, dentists, chiropractors. We ended up with an accountant, got us $250,000. I was roommates for 3 years in the early 80s with Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell when they were doing what became Evil Dead. They were out of Detroit and had raised money showing like a Super 8 kind of a product reel. The same thing with the Coen brothers. They were out of Minnesota. They did a short version of Blood Simple and showed that to investors in Minneapolis. And of course, in Detroit and Minneapolis, people with disposable investable money don't, you don't see many movie investments across the desk. So, in a way, for those guys, it was a little easier than to, try to raise money out of New York. I think that on the plus side, back in the day, you either shot on 16 and had to blow it up, or you shot on 35. Today, with the digital revolution, anybody with a digital camera and a laptop computer and the right programs can make a feature film. Right.
Well, let's just talk about that, though. So today, yeah. I mean, if there's a filmmaker out there who says, "Hey, that's great. You know what? I'm gonna contact every dentist, doctor, and chiropractor in a 50-mile radius and tell them to invite them to an investor meeting for this movie." how does that work? Do you sell shares as if it was a
You know,
stock?
an investor meeting, that's like getting people there is rough unless you're sending a car for them, which is expensive. The one-on-one approach, but basically there's a standard kind of formula, which is, you set up an LLC, a limited liability corporation, and there's 100% of the investment, and that goes all back first to the investor, and then after that, it's usually a 50-50 split between the producers and the investor, but the investors recoup first. So that's traditionally the way, it's been done. The key, though, a couple of things, is, it's important, get a good casting director, because a good casting director will know what, I don't want to say names, but what recognizable actors that together might bring some value to the product. They'll know who's looking to do, an indie, or who's not concerned about the money, because they just did Iron Man 4. You know what I mean?
Right.
A good casting director has the relationships with the agents and the managers. So that's really key. I mean, I get credited with, like Rosamo and Zach Braff and Gretchen and Amanda Peet and Matt Lillard and all these people. Well, they all came in through my casting director, through Judy Anderson, and so she, knew the talent that was out there. So that's number one. And number two is that, and this is really rarely done. You need to talk to a sales agent, because at the end of the day, everyone's concerned about, get the movie in the can. Well, once it's shot and edited, you still have to sell it, license it, and get, start the revenue stream going. And so that's why a sales agent, a sales rep, it's good to talk to them before you cast and say, I'm thinking about, this actor, this actor, this actor, who means the most internationally? And that's a key word, internationally. 20 years ago, 70% of all revenues were coming from the U.S., 30% overseas. Now, today, it's just the opposite.
Wow.
So if you have, and therefore, and a lot of it for indie is from TV. So it's good to have some, TV names in there. For example, in our next picture in the Networker, we've got an actor from House of Cards and an actor from Orange is the New Black. I mean, they're the two hottest shows out there right now. So that's they're terrific actors. They're perfect for the parts. But that helps my investor, get back the investment.
Right. And you bring up a good point, right? Because, that's, and I don't know, I mean, is that something they teach in film school? That this is a business,
A lot they don't teach in film school.
Right. I mean, and that's the whole thing, right? Is that, they come out of film school and I want to shoot this, but at the end of the day, it's a business. And if somebody's going to give you money, to your point, they're not gifting it to you. They're doing it as opposed to buying 10 shares of Apple or 100 shares of Apple. They're going to say, all right, I'm going to take the money that I would put on Apple or stick in the bank for no interest, and I'm going to risk it with you. But at the end of the day, they're hoping for some revenue stream.
Boy, I'll tell you, I could write a book, and I should write a book about some of the cockamamie, quote, unquote, investors that I've encountered over the years, that just turned out to be, I mean, there's a comedy / horror movie in there, because unfortunately, especially starting out, you just have to explore every avenue and talk to every jerk who professes to have the money. Listen, my first 10 years in the business, with an investor, I was like, please, it's a good movie. Please, would you get me the? And then after that, it became more about like, okay, look, you know my background. What's your background? And do the due diligence on them. Kind of turned the tables in a sense. And then I became friends with Jimmy Toback, the writer-director, and Jimmy gave me some great advice. He may even have said this in that fantastic documentary he did with Alec Baldwin about raising money, at Cannes, which is, you say to a guy who owns, a chain of Dairy Queens, look, 100 years from now, when we're all dust, the only way anyone will ever know that you were on this planet is because it says, Joe Smith presents a John Gallagher picture. And it works. It's worked for me a couple times. Of course, we all won't be around 100 years from now to see, but yeah. So people invest for different reasons. People that are super wealthy, a lot of times, what are they looking for? They're looking for immortality. They're looking for a good time. They're looking to go to a premiere.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's also, the breed that's out there looking, for, hot actresses, and you got to be careful of those guys. So it's again, they come in every shape and size, but certainly starting out, you really have to put the time in to explore. Even, are they legit? Do they even have the money?
Mm-hmm. You know, well, and that's it, right? They tell you, they make promises, and then you go out there and do it. So I mean,
sure.
It's some of the challenges, and I think that hey, you've got a great idea. I'll help you write it. Because let me tell you, I mean, everybody
thinks they're a writer.
Every filmmaker,
that's. Everything I've directed, I've been involved in 40 movies, 40 shorts and features in 30 years. And of the ones I've directed, only one short, and then this upcoming feature, The Networker, were written by someone other than me. And I always put in my agreement, you cannot rewrite this script without my written consent. So to protect your materials, and I only even became a producer to protect myself as a director.
Sure.
Now this next picture, The Networker, is I'm not producing because I know and trust and love, the producer's an old friend of mine, and so I don't have, and we're on the same page, and I don't have that. That concern.
Now, let me ask you, and we'll talk about The Networker. My question is this: because when we talk to filmmakers and stuff, and we talk about financing, sometimes what I hear is that the word is that they need to get a distribution deal before somebody will invest. So at least they know the movie's got.
That's very difficult. You might be able to, a small mom and pop distributor, maybe will give you a letter that basically says, we'll look at the picture, good luck with it. But it's very difficult. I mean, unless you have, a bankable name in there.
Gotcha.
Then that becomes a different story. And also, one should not forget again the overseas distribution. Mm-hmm. I mean, Germany is a huge market. I'm very, very lucky that my films are popular there. I go every year for 20 years to the Oldenburg Film Festival. It's the European Sundance. I'm the New York City programmer for the festival, and it's a great way to meet German distributors, and the same goes for other festivals in other countries. And of course, then Cannes, you see on TV, it's the Cannes Festival, is all the glitz and glamour. Well, that's at one end of town, and then the other end of town is the Cannes Market, where people from all over the world bring their films to be sold. And that's where the sales agent comes in so handy, because they have the relationships with these international distributors. So say a Japanese distributor comes in to your sales agent and says, I need a horror movie, I need a comedy, I need a documentary. They have a relationship. It's like going to the Javits Center to a shoe convention. It's a convention.
Right. But now let me ask you though, do they
like, where they're selling their wares?
Do they
So often it's being sold on the basis of a poster and a trailer.
Okay, but let me ask you though, do they turn around and I just lost my train of thought. I had the question, and when they're looking to
I mean, they could change the title. That's very frequent.
Yeah,
that happens quite a lot. You can call the movie. Listen, the name of my first movie was Down the Shore. It was about Italian kids from Brooklyn and preppy kids from mainline Philadelphia, which is kind of like my two worlds, who go down to Ocean City, New Jersey, for Shore Week, down the shore. Well, New Line, when they acquired the film, they said, nobody knows what that means outside of Jersey and Philly. So they retitled it Beach House. Why? Because Animal House was popular. You know what I mean?
Right.
It really talk about it being a business.
Yeah.
And of course, the poster that they did has nothing to do with the film.
Now, I got my question. So talking about the sales agents and stuff, does a lot of this have to do with the contracts? So some of the young filmmakers I've talked to, they come in and they're basically just trying to raise enough money that they're going to fall under the SAG, Screen Actors Guild, ultra low budget contract.
Under 200.
And it has a, I guess, clause in there for theatrical and TV only. So now streaming is the big way to go, right? So the odds of a $200,000 movie being shown at AMC Multiplex is slim to none, unless it's a Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity anomaly. How do they then take that with the SAG ultra low budget film and get that to Netflix or some other streaming
pay
media?
That, and unless as part of the deal with your distributor, that they pay that.
I gotcha.
That's all a negotiable thing, and that will also tell you how much they want the movie. And listen, by the way, this is why so many people, first-time directors, make a horror movie, because that is still internationally the most in-demand genre. For actors, I always tell my students, keep us an eye open for horror movies that are auditioning, because horror movies are not cast contingent. You don't need Christopher Walken in a horror movie.
Right.
And look at all the movie stars whose first movies were horror films. Tom Hanks, Rooney Mara, George Clooney, on and on. So, but again, I really, even at that low budget, work with a casting director, work with a Judy Henderson, a Donna McKenna, to put together a cast. For example, in the Networker, we have William Forsythe from The Rock, Sean Young from Blade Runner, Stephen Baldwin from The Usual Suspects, that have years of reputation. And then we've got, Deborah Twist from Kick-Ass, and Alicia Rayner from Orange is the New Black, and, Renoli Santiago from Con Air, and Jeremy Luke from Jersey Boys, and Larry Romano from King of Queens, and Phil Moon from The Big Lebowski, and Lola Friedenstein from Boardwalk Empire, and Brian Kelly from The Deli, and Victor Colicchio from Inside Man, Joey D'Onofrio, and an actress who I guarantee you will be a big star. Taylor Gildersleeve is fantastic. She's a young actress. She's been in a few things. Absolutely going to make some waves.
John, I'm not hearing my name.
So, it's sorry?
I'm not hearing my name. Where's my name?
You gotta come in and we'll talk. So, have your people call my people. But see again. So you look at that cast. I just named now. You've got some TV names, you've got some established movie names that still mean something internationally, and you've got some for example, in the case of Taylor, I guarantee you within a couple of years, she's gonna. I mean, some major studio is gonna grab her and put her in a big movie. Look, it's like the Deli. Look at all the people
exactly
came out of the Deli.
Right.
Mike
Starr.
When the movie came out, it did okay. But it wasn't until a couple years later, because there were so many guys in The Sopranos and Gretchen, and a lot of people were started to explode. That we got certain other deals on that picture.
Was the Deli?
So,
was the Deli before?
Again,
was the Deli
where
before?
The casting director really can be, you're such a wonderful collaborative ally.
Was the Deli before Goodfellas?
The Deli was after Goodfellas.
Oh, it was.
I did Street Hunter with Leguizamo was right after Goodfellas. Goodfellas came out in 90 or 89 maybe, 89 or 90. The Deli came out in 97. We had a lot of good fellas in there, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say you had Mike Starr, Joe D'Onofrio. So I was saying, I said I don't know whether you saw Goodfellas or Scorsese saw the Deli.
Well, I've been told that David Chase was a big fan of the Deli.
Really? Well, that's
seriously
great. Now we talked about Scorsese being somebody who's watched a lot of films. Now. And obviously he's known for doing that. Why do you think that's important? And what did you learn from working with all of these Scorsese actors?
Well, when I started, the first time I ever worked with a casting director was on Street Hunter with Judy Henderson. And if there was someone submitted who worked with my favorite director, Martin Scorsese, they were automatically in the film. And I've worked with so many of his actors, including his mother, who was great.
Catherine.
And what I learned from them about Marty is that he never calls cut. He doesn't call cut. The scene plays out as scripted, and then it keeps going. And the actor is free. Key word. Free to do whatever they want. And 9 out of 10 times, it's going to be not very good, but one of those times could be magic. That was one thing. Another thing I learned, which I share with anyone who will listen, is the idea of repetition within takes. What that means is, let's say it's a close-up on you. The line is, "Hey, how about a cup of coffee?" Action. "How about a cup of coffee?" And I say, "Keep rolling." Again, you say the line, "Keep rolling." Slower, faster. I can give you direction. All within one take, I'll get 8 or 10 takes. And what that does, if you do it the right way, it takes the actor to the point where when I do say cut, and I say, "So how was that for you?" They go, "I have no idea. I have no idea what I said." That's good. We like that because we don't want acting. We want truth. We want being. We want it to be real, and that's how you do it. That's worked for me. I mean, in so many ways. I mean, the camera just. I had a scenario where there was an actress who did this take for me, a close-up. It was unbelievable. We were crying. It was incredible. And just to be safe, I had her do it again. But when we saw the dailies the next day, the take that got us all emotional was not very good. It was the next take where she was drained. That was perfect. You just can't tell. The camera's a magical instrument. You really can't tell till you see it, and until you edit it. So that's why you want to try to get coverage and get different shots to protect you. In the editing.
Anybody that you could say that you never want to work with again, that was just a horrible experience?
Oh, absolutely. There's an actress the only actress I ever fired, actually was on the Deli, but I can't tell you her name. However, I will tell you that it was her second movie. She was subsequently fired by 2 film directors and 2 TV shows.
Interesting. So
she's from Staten Island. That's all I'll give you.
Oh, wow! I know who you're talking about.
Very lucky. I've learned so much from the actors. My set is all about the actors.
Wait, if I guess her name, if I guess her name, will you tell me if I'm
for the actor?
If I guess her name, will you tell me if I'm right?
I know. You can guess, but I won't tell you.
Well, there's only one actress I know that sounds like you. It's who you're describing, and she was married to somebody from The Hangover. I'm gonna take that as a winner.
So I talked about the network. Let me quickly just mention, too, I've got 2 movies in post-production, 2 features, Enchantments, a romantic comedy, written, directed, and starring Kelsey O'Brien. I'm the exec producer. The romantic comedy Sam, which I wrote and produced with the director, Nick Brooks, who is Mel's son.
Yeah, that's great. Now let me. Let's talk. John, we're going to go over, if that's okay with you. If you're not in a rush.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Because I'm just having a great time.
I've got a terrific.
I've got 1,000 things.
Horror film set in the 20s called The Horror at Yellowhook, written by Bonnie DeBonis and Joey Cabal. It's terrific, really good. And they wrote for me a script tailored to the particular talents of Mr. Joseph D'Onofrio. So we got a lot in the pipeline, and a couple of more pictures with Steve Stanulus, Stripped, and Fickle, which I wrote with Ryan O'Callaghan for Frank Vincent, who I've done a lot of work with over the years. Yeah, you're going.
Hold on, you're going too fast for me. I'm gonna reel you back, and let's talk about Sam, and working with Mel Brooks' son Nick.
Yeah.
All right. So what's that like? What's that writing process like? And does he have any kind?
This was Nick's story, his idea, and he told it to me over a series of dinners at a great Italian restaurant in Midtown called Rossini's, and then I would start writing a treatment, and then he would constantly rewrite. He was a really good. So I do a draft. Let's shoot it. He was very much about the rewrite, and which is good. It was a good discipline to have that with Nick, and so we created a 30-page treatment eventually, and then I would start the screenplay, and I would write to a certain point, then he would take over. We would then write together, and then ultimately he would do the final polish. I was, for a few years, I was going to direct it, but then eventually Nick felt that he wanted to direct it. It was really his baby, and of course gave him all the support I could, and recommended a lot of actors and crew people, and a comedy for me. I know he feels the same way. It has to have heart.
Now let me ask you though.
Deli has a lot of heart.
Does he?
Sam has a lot of heart.
Does he take? Does he take his?
I'm so down on these movies like Tammy and Sex Tape. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. But you know,
Excuse me.
does he take his script and ask his dad to read it, punch it up, get ideas?
Actually, you know, we did it. We did a number of readings, which we videotaped, and Mel, you know, and he sent Mel the DVD of the readings, and oh, absolutely. I mean, his input. Oh my God, comedic legend. I'm very blessed to have to know Mel, and I've had dinner with him a couple times and spoke on the phone, etc. So I'm sure, you know, I'm sure that he gave Nick some invaluable advice before directing, and I, you know, chimed in with what I could offer. But you know, I would say that the major difference between us is, you know, I love improv. I love to do improv. I love to shoot the scene as scripted, but then do an improv version. I mean, even the Deli is probably 40% improvised. Nick is much more about the page, much more about the text, and that was an interesting, you know, again, an interesting exercise for me to, even in directing the readings, was to, guys, we're sticking to the script.
Yeah.
And consequently, you know, we put a lot of time into the script to really make it, you know, what we thought was special. And again, that was a unique experience for me, because you know, I'm more about like do a couple of drafts and, you know, let's bring it to life with the actors and see what they, you know, what they contribute. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's really interesting. I mean, the film that I did that we just had the screening for was an entirely improvised film. The director had the story, and he basically said, "Okay, in this scene, this is what you want. This is what he wants. This is what she's looking for."
Exactly.
And go. And I'll tell you, we went to the screening. Audiences loved it. And one of the things that
you had super fun shooting it, I'm sure.
Exactly. And you know what? It's organic because it's just the dialogue's coming out. So it's what you're feeling at the time. It's what you're reacting to in the moment. I mean,
That's right. You know, it's also, Michael, think of, you know, look, when we see any movie, we want to feel like it's happening for the first time.
Right.
When you see it, when you do an improv, it is happening for the first time. I did an entire feature called Cupidity, entirely improv, off of one piece of paper, and it was great. It was like you're writing on set with the actors while the camera's rolling, and it's really super fun.
Yeah, and not only that though, it's you know, I mean, I've heard that, you know, talking about Scorsese, is he loves for his actors to improv. And you wonder how much of what they're doing is scripted versus what's on the page. You know,
one of my favorite Scorsese movies didn't do well when it was first released. In New York. Pardon me. The lengthy opening 25-minute sequence of VE Day at the nightclub. I have the screenplay. It's like 4 pages. It's all improv, and it's brilliant. Of course, you know, they had the money to just keep going with endless extras and,
right,
you know, shoot for weeks and weeks and weeks. But, when it works, it really works. I mean, you also have to be careful. A lot of times with improv, it's just that, you know, people start just talking at the same time and dropping F-bombs, and it's not so much fun. But, you know, I teach an improv for a film class at one-on-one, and I'm always amazed at, you know, actors who are like, I'm not really good at improv, who, if you create the right environment, just really, you know, rise to the occasion. And actors have to have that skill. I mean, how many times you go to an audition, and they ask you to improv?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Sure.
Key thing to have.
Right. Now let's talk about something else you've got in the pipeline. A film called Fickle with the Frank Vincent, who is from Goodfellas, famous for the line "Go and get your shine box."
Yeah.
For those of you that
Frank, I love Frank Vincent. You know, he, from the first time I saw him in Raging Bull, I met him a few years later when we did Street Hunter, the action movie, and I told Judy Henderson, look, just bring him in. Don't make him audition. He's got the part if he wants it. And it's been, you know, a close friendship ever since. We've done, I don't know, 7 films and wrote 2 scripts together. I even directed him in a play with Tony Sirico and Vinny Pastore, which is how they all met Vinny. And, you know, I've always felt that Frank has a lot more to offer than, you know, just playing a gangster.
Right.
And so with Fickle, we take his image and kind of turn it inside out. In the context of a romantic comedy with some younger actors, and so this is a real labor of love, and we're hoping to do it next year.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic, and I'm sure that
it's easy to write when you have a specific actor, you know, in mind. It really, for me anyway, it really helps.
Right.
It helps me write.
And now, when you've got all these movies in the hopper, in say pre-production, I mean, are you using the same investors, or are we seeking out other investors?
Different, yeah, a little different. We're always looking, you know. The horror at Yellow Hook is one group that the producers and writer. I'm not a producer on that, so they're dealing with that. Fickle, I am a producer on, so I'm more involved, you know, on that one. There's a project, a comedy called Hi Hitler, which is based on a brilliant one-woman show by a terrific actress named Lucy Pohl, who's also in The Networker. She's actually in Edinburgh right now in Scotland with Hi Hitler doing the show at the very prestigious Edinburgh Arts Festival, and we're hoping to do that next year. Again, as a narrative feature, not as a one-person movie. So you know how it is. You really have to keep as many things, you know, juggling as possible, and then whatever comes through. But just don't put your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Because that could just take, you know.
And you won't...
I mean, in my experience, things have happened either really, really quickly or like years. I mean, Blue Moon, it took almost 10 years. The Deli took like a month because the guy whose idea it was, he was paying for it.
Right.
Now, it really depends.
Now let's talk about that.
Sorry?
As an independent director doing independent films, how do you sustain a living during those lean years when you're not in production or making money from a film? I know that you teach. I mean, what is it that, you know, the aspiring director out there who's, you know, looking for that career to say, hey, man, I just want to make a living and I just want to direct. What kind of life do they have to look forward to?
In my case, you know, I do budgets for movies. I write commission scripts. I teach. You know, I think that, you know, starting out, I think it's a good idea. Like when I started out, you know, I had already directed my first feature, but I worked on other movies, you know, as a PA, as a boom operator, as a grip. And because that keeps you in the game. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You know, and even on those films, I mean, you know, you meet somebody who turns out, you know, can help you later.
Right.
So I would say to try to stay within, you know, within the showbiz realm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let me tell you,
good idea.
One piece of advice. Let me see if you agree with this. I've told everybody from, you know, whether, you know, it's you know, and like I said, I've worked behind the scenes in theater, on the stage, in movies, behind the scenes in movies. I mean, whatever I could do to keep my head in the game. And aside from stressing the importance of networking, I always say be nice to everybody, from the catering person to the guy that's collecting the garbage, because I could assure you that the guy that's collecting the garbage is probably a writer or a director who's looking to do something, and they're going to remember the fact that you looked at them or treated them unkindly, because one day they might be the next Martin Scorsese.
Michael, our mothers raised us well. My mom is listening. Hi, Mom. It's so true. You have to be a human being to people. And I've seen such dreadful behavior starting out on sets. Not my sets, except, on a couple, I fired a grip and an electrician off of the Deli who were arguing, having a fight about something. I said, guys, shake hands and tell me you're going to have a beer later, otherwise you got to leave. And the one guy's, yeah, but this guy, I said, okay, you're fired. I mean, that just cuts in. That's not the vibe that I go for on my sets. I'm 3/4 Italian. My sets have the vibe of an Italian wedding. Mm-hmm. It's family. It's fun. We play music. The work gets done. This is all for the actors. You can't have that kind of behavior going on,
right?
And expect to get, performances. So it is so true. And yes, as far as listen, I had there's a movie Lou Lombardi, from 24 and Sopranos. Lou directed him and starred in a movie called Doughboys up in the Bronx with Mike Starr and Vinnie Pastore, somewhat inspired by the Deli. And I went up to visit, and I don't know, I was talking to an AD, he's a nice kid, and I didn't think twice about it. And like 3 years later, I get an email from him saying, John, I met you when you visited Doughboys. You were so nice to me, and I just I'm producing this European TV show. I'd like to do an hour special on you. And I'm like, wow, okay, cool. I mean, he remembered me because I was someone who was nice to him. I get a lot of emails like people like writers, looking for to send me scripts or actors. I really try to answer everybody, even because I know what it's like. I know what it's like to send your script somewhere and never hear from them.
Right.
And I also happen to like actors. Mm-hmm. So it is true, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. It's I mean, for me, it's been the same thing. I mean, I've always distracted myself as being a people person, and I think if you generally like people, you'll treat people the way you would want to be treated, regardless of what they're doing at the time or what you're doing at the time, and it's just that, as you said, there's a humanity factor to that. So, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we've just in talking in the past few weeks, it's amazing how many things we've got in common. But hey, we've got to get to the news, and I know that you said that you're gonna join me here for the news. So we're just gonna get right into that. And folks, I hope you appreciated the time we've spent with John Gallagher, director and producer, and we're going to talk about what's happening now in the news. Let me just pull it up here. Interesting stuff. First off, I've got one thing that I found funny this week, parlaying right to what we were talking about, is Freddie Prinze Jr.'s comment about how unprofessional Kiefer Sutherland was allegedly a prick to work with during 24. And And I find that one of the things that I found interesting about this was, this is coming out 5 years later. Didn't happen at the thing. And one of the comments that he made when somebody pressed him for a reason, he said, well, he was asked to take his shoes off to do a scene with him because apparently Kiefer Sutherland is short and Freddie Prinze Jr. is tall, and I guess they didn't want such a disparity in height. And I guess he was mad that they didn't ask Kiefer to sit or stand on a milk crate, and they asked him to take his shoes off. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether this is really making Kiefer hard to work with, or Freddie Prinze Jr. is opening his mouth just to change feet. So.
Listen. Well, my only comment there, Michael, and regarding Kiefer Sutherland is I heard some things.
Okay.
I can't really elaborate.
I heard some things. You insulted me just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. I heard some things I heard. Okay, let's move.
You didn't go home and get a shine box.
You didn't go home and get a shine box. So who knows? So maybe there's some validity to what Freddie Prinze Jr. is talking about, and it goes more beyond whether or not he was asked to take his shoes off. Which just reminds me of wanting to go into a Jerky Boys sketch. So
Kamal just directed a movie, by the way.
Did he?
Looking forward to seeing. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. I love that movie only because my acting teacher is in it. I mean, as funny as those guys are, I thought the audio tapes were funnier than the movie.
Who's your acting teacher?
William Hickey.
Oh my gosh.
I loved Bill.
Legend.
But I mean, just there you go. The nicest man ever. I mean, sitting in his class, nominated for an Academy Award, working with Al Pacino and everyone else under the sun. I mean,
and Mel Brooks and the producers.
Mel Brooks and the producers, and yet, and I've been to some very cruel acting classes. I've participated in classes where the teacher was not very nice to the students and took it as an opportunity for him or her to really insult their performance and strike down their ego.
That's a real. I mean, I taught at the neighborhood playhouse for 5 years.
But let me tell you,
I know some of the things that go on at some of these conservatories. It's like if they don't drink the Kool-Aid,
right?
You know what I mean?
Well, and let me tell you, I mean, Bill took some actors that were very, very green, and we sat there and we watched their stuff, and clearly it wasn't as good and up to par as some of the others. He never insulted anyone or put them down in any way. And at the end of the day, I mean, I think he took the cue of, those that told Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman they would never make it, and basically said, hey, this could be this person's first day, and maybe they're not going to go anywhere, or maybe they're the next Dustin Hoffman. And to that point, I really had a lot of respect for him as a human being, as an actor. Just great person to work with, and I was fortunate enough to study with him while he was alive. Moving on, The Big Bang Theory is being postponed. Cast wants $300K an episode and 25 points on 0.25 points on the back end. You think they have a gripe, or are they making enough money? Or at the end of the day, does this come down to the old Gilligan's Island Seinfeld thing, where these guys are afraid they're never going to work again?
Well, I mean, look, that's is it them or is it their representation?
Well, good point.
One. Number two, look, I'm reminded of when The Sopranos became such a monster hit, and Jimmy Gandolfini was, they upped his salary, and he insisted they up everybody else's salary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I don't know enough about TV series to know how much money is that show making. I mean, some of these numbers are just, I mean, they're insane when you hear about, per episode. I mean, yet at the same time, will they have a life? Is there a life after a hit series? There's certainly examples of yes, and then there's, I mean, look at, look at the Seinfeld people. Julia Louis-Dreyfus, she has a hit show.
Right.
I mean, she had another show. I don't think that did that well, but
yeah.
So I don't know. It's not my.
And no, it's just I
hey,
find
God bless her. They can get it. God bless them. You know
right,
what I mean?
Right. And I guess that's it, right? And a lot of that is, as you pointed out, falls under representation. Is folks see these numbers, 300K an episode, and obviously to the average, to the 99% or the 99.9%. That's an exorbitant amount of money when you're talking about 20 episodes, right? 300K an episode.
It's insane, really.
But
when you think about it.
But what folks aren't realizing is they have a team.
Remember when they started when Hollywood started dishing out like the $10 million, $15, $20 million salaries. Nicholson and Jim Carrey and and consequently, what is a simple stupid movie like Sex Tape costs what? That probably costs $40 million.
Yeah,
I mean,
we're gonna get to this week's box office, and so you're one step ahead of me, John. I mean, I'm already there with you, but yeah. So but I guess the point is that what people don't realize is these folks, they have a team, and out of that 300K an episode, whatever it sums up to at the end of a season, the agent gets 20%, the manager gets 10%, and that gets chipped away.
Ex-wives.
Yeah, exactly.
Child support.
So it really gets chipped away at. I mean, don't get me wrong. They're not going to cry poverty, and they're not going to be forced to drive a Chevy like you and me. But
I tell you, the most egregious example of this, the Kardashians, for crying out loud.
Yeah, there you go.
What? Crazy.
But hey, Sharknado 2 is on Sci-Fi tonight. Any take on Sharknado 2? I mean,
right. I mean, sharks, you can't go wrong.
It's crazy. I mean, I could just say that I'm going to try and make my way to Martha's Vineyard next year. I am a Jaws fanatic. Jaws was one of the first movies I saw as a kid. And with that, I say there would be no Sharknado, no Anaconda, no Piranha, no other ripoff you could possibly think of. But the 40th anniversary of that movie is next year, which I can't believe. Wow,
that's insane. When I was at Emerson for the film journal I published, I wrote Spielberg, listed maybe 6 questions, and the last one was, who are your influences? And he listed 50.
Wow.
50 filmmakers.
Yeah, and there you go. Goes back to how a good director or filmmaker or actor, it really needs to know the history of film. I mean, you really need to study and just watch. I mean, I'm addicted to Turner Classic Movies. I will watch anything that's on. I mean, my wife, is like another black and white movie, and I'm like, but this is a classic, and it's crazy. But if you haven't seen Jaws, if you're one of the few people or someone that's out there and you haven't seen Jaws, run, don't walk to get the Blu-ray. What they did with it was amazing. It's just it's an unbelievable film. Now to the box office. Okay, which I get aggravated with every week. I look at the box office, and I don't see films that I mean, it's really been a long time since I've really seen something that I said, hey, you know what? I've got to get to the movies to see this.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, Lucy, the Scarlett Johansson film, opened at number 1,
big numbers.
44 million, and you were right on the money there, a $40 million budget. So clearly you know, when someone's investing or the group of people are investing and you've got $40 million at stake, the $4 million over is not going to really cover much, if anything. So not really a big opening.
There's the cost of the production. Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, good. It's the cost of the production plus the cost of the release. But you're also talking about international. And Lucy, which I have not seen, it's one of two movies I would like to see in the theater, is directed by the great Luc Besson.
That's right.
Who gave us La Femme Nikita, the movie, The Professional with Jean Reno and Natalie Portman.
And Michael Badalucco.
The Fifth Element. I even liked his last picture, which was fairly well critically drubbed, The Family, with De Niro. And he knows how to make an action picture.
Yeah.
And, he's also produced a bunch from Paris with Love, with Travolta. And the Taken
interesting
It's also Luc Besson's company. So
interesting point, though, is that
so that's not. I think they're pretty much. It's not a risk. Let's say.
Right.
You want to always, at whatever the budget, you want to minimize the investor's risk. But this film is probably co-financed by an American distributor, whoever has the U.S. rights. And either a big European company or his own company, Europa itself.
Yep. Well, you hit the nail on the head. It was produced by Europa Corp for the $40 million, and Universal's releasing it. So, I mean, no question, Luc Besson is an amazing talent. My only point being that summer equaling blockbuster. $44 million for the number one picture is not really,
That's right. This has been a very disappointing summer at the box office. I think, listen, let's face it. For example, I have some friends, Brian Kelly and Sean Young are in My Man's a Loser, that opened in a couple of screens on Friday, but also on demand. I watched it this weekend on demand. Mm-hmm. There's so many there's so many ways to watch movies now.
Right.
It's not such a surprise. Look, there's always going to be theaters. It's a social experience. Mm-hmm. But to really get people out there, I don't know. The other movie I really want to see is Rise or Dawn, the new Planet of the Apes?
It's Dawn, and that's in its third week, and was number 3. Number 2 is Hercules. Okay, $29 million for $100 million budget. Okay, let me just run these down. Right, so 3 is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, in its third week. Okay, $16.4 million, but overall made $172 million domestic.
Yeah.
So I mean, no issues there. It's going to hit $1 billion between domestic and worldwide. Okay. Same thing. The Purge, another one. Are you there? Did I lose you, John?
Hello? I think I lost you.
Oh, I thought I lost you, yeah. Sounded like an airplane was coming in. So we had the Purge, which was a $9 million take and a $9 million budget, which is actually very small for a wide release, 2,800 screens and $9 million film. So that's. But again, to your point, horror movie. And then we've got, coming down, coming in 6th is Sex Tape, which is, $6 million, $40 million, or $28 million total, $40 million budget. And then Tammy took in $78 million overall and a $20 million budget. So, I mean, here we go with these films. I mean, I think... And here's I want to leave with this thought is less and less people, as you pointed out, are coming to see. Box office is down 12% this year. in July and 20% overall for the summer. So the summer blockbuster is harder and harder to make happen. Movies like you're making, the independent films that actually have a nice story, deep in characterization, are not being financed by the studios.
Absolutely not.
Folks are in droves binge watching Breaking Bad, House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, because they're craving stories. Why isn't Hollywood waking up and saying, you know what, people want a nice drama. They don't need to go and see something blowing up every 28 seconds in 3D with a superhero that it's got a superpower.
Yeah.
And
things just got so dumbed down. I mean, back in the 70s, think about the movies that the studios made. French Connection, Taxi Driver, Close Encounters. I mean, they were smart. Badlands. There were smart movies.
Right.
And, those days are long gone. I think so many of them were originals, too. There's very few original screenplays are made now.
Yeah.
Everything is based on a graphic novel or a comic book or an old TV show. Imagination, and it's really sad because it's embarrassing. Like when I go to Europe in particular, I mean, Hollywood, American movies used to be the movies that everyone around the world loved, and because there was so much going on in them, and they had so much to say and so much heart and life, and today they're just this, unfortunately, with rare exceptions, they're just dumb, mindless, so-called entertainment. It's really sad.
Well, listen, I could talk to you for hours on end about this topic and about movies and about things, and hopefully, this is just the beginning. You could come back anytime you want, and
I would love to. This is great.
And we could continue this conversation, and I'll try and make it there on the what'd you say, on the 17th or the 14th.
Good. We'll speak long before then.
Yeah, absolutely. John, thank you very much for being a part of conversation today and part of Center Stage. And all the best with the Networker and your future films. Thank you very much. And that was John Gallagher. And that's our show for you tonight, folks. Thanks for listening. Tune in 2 weeks for Center Stage with Michael Tota and Harvey Rothman will be back joining.